Video, I will be explaining what Domain 6.2, Provision of Education and Training, is all about. I'll start by introducing the concept of training. I'll state the importance of training, and then it's divided into two parts. Part 1 is understanding the behavioral statements. There's 3 behavioral statements in Domain 6.2, so you need to understand behavioral statement A, B, and C, and you need to provide evidence for all of them since it's less than 4, so that 75% won't work. So part B, I'll just be providing example of evidences you can include in the behavioral statement A, B, and C. We all know that education is really important. It's important for the development of pharmacists. And according to the code of conduct, a pharmacist is supposed to keep abreast of their knowledge and skills and attitude as well as values. So you need to be continually growing. Domain 6.2 focuses on the provision of education and training to other people. This is really important because it fosters a culture of continuous learning and growth inside the health profession, inside your workplace or wherever you're stationed. So this one is focused on provision of training, not the subject of the training. So it's supposed to, the evidence and everything that you collect is supposed to be explaining the training session, not the subject or what you will be training about. In part 1, as I've said, I'll be explaining the behavioral statements. This is really important because understanding the requirement of each behavioral statement then equips you with the necessary tools so that you can be able to provide the evidence. One method to ensure that you cover the behavioral statement is a mind mapping process, whereby you just clearly map out what will the requirement of each behavioral statement be, and then you name the evidences that you would include in each behavioral statement. So I would suggest that after watching after understanding what each behavioral statement requires, just draft a short mind map for yourself to then, draft that for behavioral statement A or behavioral statement B or C. This is the type of evidence that I'll be including. Behavioral statement A says, teaching effectively according to an agreed training plan with guidance from a more experienced colleague. As you can see, I have highlighted the different parts of the behavioral statement. This is important so that you're able to see exactly what I'm asked to provide. Here, you're supposed to show how you taught effectively according to an agreed upon training plan with guidance from a more experienced colleague. So these elements will be important in how you then provide your evidence. First, we need to understand the principle of effective teaching. So what does effective teaching mean? It means delivering the training material in such a way that the attendees understand what was provided and then they're able to retain the information. It means that you present information in a clear and organized manner. It means that you use interactive methods to keep the learners or the people who are being trained interested and involved. It means to also continually check for understanding through questions, discussion, or feedback. This can be done at the end of the training session to just assess how the training was. This is a process whereby you can show to whoever will be assessing your work that you understand effective training. Behavioral statement A says, working with an experienced colleague to develop and follow a structured training plan. So this means that you need to be guided by someone senior to you. And in this behavioral statement, it must show who guided you and what did they guide you on, or who is the person you sought guidance from in relation to fulfillment of this behavioral statement. It can be a tutor or a pharmacy manager, and it needs to show how did they guide you. So this is where you include your training plan. Now that we understand what effective training is and we understand why it's important to be guided by someone senior to you, let's then develop a training plan. But what is a training plan? A training plan is a structured document that outlines the objectives of the training, the content of the training, the delivery method. So how will you deliver the content of what you want to train on? For instance, if I wanted to train on malaria, how will I deliver the information about malaria to the people I want to train on? Will I use a presentation? If it's on hand hygiene, will I use live demonstration? That type of thing. It includes the schedule, so we need to know when you'll be training. It includes the assessment method, so are you going to use a quiz? Are you going to use a checklist? How will you assess that the people understood? And you can also include an evaluation criteria, so that means that you can ask for survey or feedback to just understand how the whole training program was. A training plan serves as a roadmap for both the trainer and the trainees. It guides them, from the learning process from starting until finishing. Now going on to behavioral statement B, which says performing a self-assessment and identifying your own learning needs. So first, perform a self-assessment. Next, identify your learning needs. And finally, have a plan on how you'll meet the learning needs. It's not enough for you to just understand that I need to learn 1, 2, 3 without you having, a plan on how you will learn. So the concept of self-assessment is identifying what you need to learn, and then learning plan is then developing a plan on how you would meet your identified learning needs. Performing a self-assessment means you are evaluating your own performance. You are evaluating your own skills and your own knowledge. You are hoping to identify areas where improvement is needed. It emphasizes the importance of taking ownership of your own learning journey. Remember, here you are not assessing the people you are going to train. You are assessing yourself. So it's performing a self-assessment, not the trainee assessment and identifying their learning needs. That can be part of the training, but a self-assessment is you identifying your own learning needs. In the self-assessment, you are identifying the gaps, like knowledge gaps. You can use a SWOT analysis. Identify your strengths when it comes to training, not just on the subject. So you can say something about the gaps or the strengths that you have when it comes to organizing trainings, ability to talk in public, or whatever that you can say about training people. And then you can add something about the topic that you want to be training on. And then a learning plan is a way for you to meet the identified learning gaps. So once you find gaps in your own learning, then you develop a learning plan set by setting smart goals, so that you are able to then have a plan on how you're going to meet the gaps you've identified in your self-assessment. And this will serve as a roadmap for, how you're going to learn and improve and meet those needs. Statement C is about participating in developing the learning activities. So now that you've already developed the training plan on what you want to train on, and you've created a roadmap, you've performed a self-assessment, you've assessed what you need to learn, how you need to learn, and you've developed a learning plan. Now you develop the learning activities for your training session. Behavioral statement C says it means that you are creating the training activities that the people who are going to attend the session will learn from. So are you going to create a presentation for your training session? It means that you are using training techniques to administer the training session and then assess the training, because you need to evaluate if people have learned or if they've gained the skills or the objectives that you set to achieve in your training. So in behavioral statement C, you are using the techniques, you are using your plan, you are implementing your self-assessment and learning plan in developing a method or a way that the people are going to learn. So how are the people going to learn? Are you going to use a presentation? Will that be your training technique? Are you going to use a live demonstration? If it's hand hygiene, maybe you demonstrate the process, and then after that, you are going to assess in climbing to ask them to demonstrate, and then can have a checklist. That's a training technique. So if I'm training on malaria and I'm using a presentation, that is a training technique. And then at the end, I will use a quiz to assess that training. So in behavior statement C, you are using a training method, and then you are applying an assessment technique. So you are using the training plan, like I've said, but you use it as a guide to prepare the learning activities. It involves, creating the presentation, the quiz, having an attendance register if there's going to be a case at the end. Maybe it's a malaria presentation or it's a specific clinical topic, then you can have a case and something like that. It includes conducting the training using the training method, like I said, and using the training material that you've created. And then at the end of the training, you need to assess what was learned in the topic of the training. So maybe there's a quiz, or maybe there is a live demonstration and a checklist, and you want to assess if they've learned, and then you can have a discussion if there's a need. And then you can have a survey to just assess how the training went, to get feedback on the overall training session. Moving on to part 2 of the presentation. Here I will just be making examples of evidences that you can include in the behavioral statements. Again, this is not cast in stone. So if you don't agree with me in the evidences, it's okay. Or if you have other ideas, it's still fine. But with what I've seen, I would suggest just looking into this type of evidences and maybe considering them for your training session and your CPT activity. So in behavioral statement A, since you are required to create a training plan with guidance, maybe you can start by communicating with your tutor or the person who's senior to you. Can be a WhatsApp, it can be an email, it can be a written document signed by you that you send to your tutor or the person who will be guiding you, asking for guidance on how to create a training plan or how to train effectively. And then they can respond with the guidance that you would then need, and then you can apply that guidance. Then you can create your training plan. So the person is identified, maybe there's a signature there is their name, their PIN number, so that we can see that this is the person who guided you. And then it shows that, they are telling you on how to create the training plan, or they are sharing resources on where you can get information about, creating a training plan. That still works. For behavioral statement B, performing the self-assessment and creating the learning plan, you can use a SWOT analysis. So you can have a document, you write down your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats when it comes to training, not the subject of your training session. So if I'm training on malaria, what do I need to learn to improve my skills, my self-assessment in terms of training? Do I know how to train staff effectively? Do I know how to create a training plan? What training methods will I use, and how will I assess that? Then I can add information about, do I have confidence training? What do I need to improve? What can I do to improve that if it's a goal that I want to achieve? What do I know about the topic, that I want to improve on? So you see that I am performing a self-assessment on what I need to know in terms of training skills and what I need to know on the topic I want to be training on. And then a learning plan, you're creating a plan on how you're going to meet the identified gaps in your self-assessment. So you can't say you need to learn how to train effectively and learn training methods. Then you speak something else about malaria, and like the goal is learning training methods, and then you speak on your learning plan, you say something about malaria. It doesn't make sense. So your self-assessment should help you develop the the gaps that you want to then meet. So if it's me trying to understand what are training methods, how can I meet that need? Maybe I'll watch a YouTube video, or maybe I'll read an article online, which is explaining like the different training methods, and then I can choose a training method for my liking for the training session I want to conduct. So that's the whole concept. And then you can include a timeline as well, which specifically states when you are going to start meeting the gaps that you've identified. An example of a learning plan would be like creating SMART goals. So for behavioral statement C, the evidences that you can include is the learning material that you included. If it was a presentation, you can include the presentation. If it was a presentation on malaria, then you include that presentation. You include pictures of you performing a simulation on how to compound or how to perform hand hygiene. And then you can include an assessment method. So an assessment method is a way for you to assess what was learned in the training, or if learning did actually happen. So for instance, if I was training on malaria, I would have a quiz. At the end, I would have like 10 questions that I ask the people. And then based on the feedback or the marks that they get, then I'll be able to then assess if they learned. Or I can start by administering a pre-training questionnaire. So just to understand what they know already. And then after the presentation, I have a post-presentation questionnaire, then to check if the knowledge has increased. And then at the end, you can administer a survey to just assess your delivery method, your way of presentation, the training material, just the overall training session. Then you can include an attendance register and a proof that training actually did happen by including pictures and something like that.